What's up YouTube? It's me, Jamie K, and today we are going to be talking about why you should always trust your gut as a nurse. Whether it's an ER nurse, a med-surg nurse, an ICU nurse, any type of nurse, you have spidey senses that you need to listen to. I'm still a new nurse, so my spidey senses are still growing, but I have had some instances where I could tell, like, that's not right. I don't know what's going on, but that's not right. And that's what I wanted to talk to you guys about. Even though we're not very, very experienced, we still work with patients all day, every day. We're with the patients way more than the doctors are. So we're gonna notice when things are off, when something's not right. The EKG didn't look like that 5 minutes ago. Her vital signs are kind of declining. We're gonna notice subtle changes way faster, way quicker than the doctor will or anybody else will. And that's kind of what I wanted to touch on today in this video. So when I say trusting your gut, this can range from just the weird feeling that you have on the inside that something's not right, or actual hardcore, like, physical evidence that something's not right. So including EKG changes, vital signs, decreased level of consciousness, and then subjective things from the actual patient, like sense of impending doom and restlessness, things like that. So I just wanted to give a couple of examples where I felt that way, or where I noticed that something wasn't right and I was either right or I was either wrong. I still wanted to bring up both examples. So let's get started. Okay, so number 2 is EKG changes. So I had a patient that was on the monitor. They were here for chest pain and everything was fine. They were fine. Their EKG looked fine when they initially got here. However, I went in the room to check on them one time and I noticed there was some ST elevation on their EKG. So I was asking, like, how do you feel? Do you feel any, like, difference in your chest pain? Are you having any other symptoms at this moment? So the patient was chilling, they were fine, but the EKG just looked different. So I printed off the EKG, I showed the doctor. Thankfully, it was a really, like, nice doctor that didn't mind explaining things to me. So obviously when you think ST elevation, you think that there's something wrong with the heart, potentially a heart attack. So I was like, that looks crazy. They came for chest pain, I'm about to print off EKG. So I showed the doctor and they were okay with teaching me things. So they said that sometimes people can have something called pericarditis, and sometimes pericarditis can show ST elevations on the EKG. I did not know that. I was very grateful that the doctor didn't just say, no, it's not a STEMI, no, it's not a heart attack, and just give me EKG back and make me feel like I was wrong for noticing that change. They told me that it was good that I brought it to their attention, because what if it wasn't pericarditis? What if it was a subtle change in their EKG that could have been life-threatening? So even though it wasn't what I thought it was still a really good learning and teaching lesson. So now I'm still gonna print off the EKG when I see ST elevation, whether I think it's pericarditis or not, but it's still very good information that I didn't know before. So noticing subtle changes in your EKG. I also had another patient that went into VTAC, but she was up, she was awake, she was talking, she was fine, but she was in VTAC. So print off EKG, tell the doctor she has no symptoms right now, but this is her EKG. So just making sure that you're watching the monitor, making sure your patient is on a monitor in the first place. How are you going to notice the EKG changes if they're not hooked up to the monitor? So EKG changes is a very big, it's something that you should always report to the doctor if something changes. So number 3, I wanted to talk about decrease in level of consciousness. So this is very important in all of your patients. If your patient comes in and they're walkie-talkie, they're alert, oriented to all the things, and then an hour later, 2 hours later, they're drowsy, unable to hold a conversation with you, hard to wake up, you're having to give painful stimuli just to get a response, like, that's obviously a big change. Sometimes your changes can be that drastic, other times not so much. So, for example, I had a patient that came in for, I think it was abdominal pain. I can't remember, but it was something that wasn't like, it wouldn't make you think like, oh, something's terribly wrong. So she came in and I first got an IV on the right side. When I stuck her, she yelled. She was like, oh, that hurts so bad. I just remember her reaction was a lot. And she needed 2 types of medicines or whatever. So I remember having to get another IV. So a little while later, I came back in the room and I got one on the left side. And I remember when I stuck her on the left side, she didn't even flinch. Like, she didn't move, she didn't look at me, she didn't flinch, she didn't yell. Like the reaction from the first IV and the second one were totally different. So I got the IV done and I started saying, hey, look at me. She was like not responding. Her EKG went into VTAC. I was letting the doctor know about all of these changes that just happened so quickly. The doctor told me that there was a really great observation that I noticed, like the whole difference between the IV things, like this one hurt, but this one didn't. And it was just like a precursor to what was to come, which was the fact that she went into VTAC. And obviously at the time I didn't leave the patient. There was other nurses in the room. They started to come in and help me when I started to notice that something was going on. And I was able to go tell the doctor about the EKG changes, and she actually ended up having a head bleed. So very important to note and notify the doctor about certain type of changes. This is another example that falls under the decrease in level of consciousness category. It was shift change. I work night shift, so the day shift nurse, we were going around to our patients and we were getting report on the patients. So this is the last patient, and we went in the room and she was telling me that he came in for seizures. He was still post-ictal, so which means like very drowsy after you have a seizure. So I mean, I've seen post-ictal before, but this was like a different type of post-ictal. I didn't see the patient before, obviously, so I don't know how they were before. So I really couldn't compare like I was able to compare in the last patient. But I knew that this was not just post-ictal. Like we were talking, the nurse was just giving me a report, and I'm just, the whole time, I don't even think I was listening to her. I was just looking at the patient like, this does not look, I don't know. It was just something. It was the gut. It was my spidey senses. They were telling me something was not right. But something definitely wasn't right. So as soon as the nurse was like, okay, did you even do anything else? I was like, no, ma'am. She left. I went straight to the doctor's office. I was like, hey, can you come take a look at this patient? I don't know what they looked like before, but I don't know. They're not very responsive. Can you just come take a look at the patient? So me and the doctor go in the room, and the patient was like slobbing. Like the patient was like laid back. I mean, they kind of did look post-ictal, but it was just different. They were slobbing. The vitals were okay. Like the vitals were fine, but it was the patient's presentation that made me think something wasn't right. Like drooling on both sides of their mouth. The breathing was very slow. Like the respiratory rate was very slow. And then the doctor like sternal rubbed him. I kind of pinched his thumb and he was not responding. So I don't know if he was post-ictal and then he went into this state of unresponsiveness and the nurse just didn't pick up on it, or he had been like that the whole time. But I just automatically knew that something wasn't right. And this was my very first rapid sequence intubation right out of orientation. And I was so nervous because it was just me and another nurse in there, and it was my patient, so I was nervous, and I was just fresh out of orientation. But I was also very proud of myself for noticing something like that. And the doctor actually was like, Jamie, thank you for coming to get me. And I was like, pat on the back, Jamie. And I was brand new out of orientation, so very proud of myself, but also very nervous at the same time to be in that situation. But anyway, just noticing difference in your patient's level of consciousness is very important. Also, speaking of respirations, number 4, I wanted to talk a little bit about overdosing, respirations, Narcan, the whole shebang. So I had a patient that actually, it wasn't my patient. I was like the floating nurse, so I was just helping out other nurses. And one of the patients' oxygen kept dropping. It was like maybe 87, 86. So you go in the room, I'm like, hey. And when you wake him up, he'll come back up to like 95. So, you know, some people drop their O2 sats when they're asleep. Not uncommon. So, I mean, I really didn't think that much of it. I didn't know very much about the patient because, again, it wasn't my patient. I was just walking by and saw it, the O2 sat of 86. So I knew he was going to fall back asleep. So I put him on a little bit of oxygen and brought him back up to like 92. So I keep doing my thing. I come back and the oxygen sats have dropped again on the nasal cannula while he's on the nasal cannula. And so I go find the nurse. I'm like, what's going on with this patient? A little bit. And they were like, he was an overdose and he just got Narcan. So I'm like, okay, that gives me a lot more information. So I go in the room and I'm looking at the patient, and I noticed that his chest will stop moving. Like it'll stop, like obviously your chest goes up and then down, and his chest would stop rising and falling. And I'm looking, I'm like it's really stopped. Like it stopped. And I've never seen this like happen in person. Like usually, like obviously you feel for a pulse and stuff. Like I've never seen like the actual chest just stop rising like that. And it was like a while ago, so I was still new. But I was like, oh my God, his chest isn't moving. Like, and it all just started clicking. Like that's why the oxygen isn't going. Whatever he took is coming back and the Narcan is wearing off. That's what I started to think. I was still proud of myself for noticing something like that and going to get the doctor. And all we did was like gave Narcan and he kind of came back out of it. But that's just another thing about going with your gut and knowing that something's not right. Like the oxygen sats, the apnea, you just know something's not right. Even though I didn't know much about the patient, I was able to assess the patient enough to know that something's not right. And last but not least, number 5, I think I'm on number 5, vital signs. So vital signs are called vital signs for a reason. They're vital. They're vital, like you need them. It's very important to have your vital signs monitoring at all times. EKG leads, blood pressure cuff, O2 sat, temperature, all those things are very important to your assessment of a patient, to the patient's treatment, to everything. So one time I think I've mentioned this story before in my previous videos, but trying to put on an O2 probe, it wasn't reading the oxygen, couldn't get an O2 reading for nothing. I had my preceptor come in and help me try to get an O2 reading, still couldn't get an O2 sat, and the patient coded. So it's very important to, like, what if I was just like, forget it, don't worry about it, he's breathing, it's fine, and I just walked out? No, that's not right. Like you have to have all your vital signs constantly being rechecked, reassessed for each patient. So it's very important. Your vital signs are very, very important. If you get a blood pressure, if you're trying to take a blood pressure and it doesn't read and the patient looks sickly, you need to try to get another blood pressure. Don't just say, oh, it'll be fine. I'm gonna recycle it in 30 minutes. Like, no, you need to get another blood pressure. Try another arm, try another size cuff, try a leg. You need to get a vital sign. What if it's too low to read and you just say, forget about it, and they don't have a blood pressure? So all these things are things that I've been learning while being an ER nurse. And I feel like the best way to learn something is to go through it, is to experience it. And with all of these things that I've just told you, I've experienced all of these things, and it's only just making me a better nurse. It's giving me the experience that I need. I'm happy that I get to learn it and then tell you guys about it. So that way you can go in kind of like, oh, I've heard about that before, or let me get on top of this, or I just want you guys to follow your gut. And don't let anybody else persuade you not to. I know we're still working on our spidey senses because we're still like new nurses, but you still have spidey senses, okay, you guys? You still have the sixth sense. We're just working on growing it. So don't neglect it just because you feel like it's so small. It still makes a difference. So I hope that helps. I'm glad you watched this far into the video. Thanks for watching. And I want to hear about your spidey sense stories in the comments below. So please let me know about situations that you've had and that you've experienced where you followed your gut or where you didn't follow your gut and what happened as a result. So thank you guys for watching, and I will see you later.